Charles Darwin had doubts about his theory. He states if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Given what we know today about the irreducible complexity of the human cell and DNA, I wonder if Charles Darwin himself would rethink his theory. Now, at the end of this video, I have two questions that are hard for evolutionists to answer. Throughout this video, I am stressing the missing evidence for macroevolution, specifically ape to human evolution. We know from evidence, observation, and everyday experiences that microevolution is true. Species, they change over time to adapt to their environment. But I'm still highly skeptical about macroevolution simply because there's no good evidence to support it. Macroevolution essentially states that species can evolve from one to another, that is, one kind evolving into another kind over a long period of time. Scientific evidence does not point to this type of evolution, but in fact, it points to creation. Macroevolution is not verified by the fossil evidence, nor has it ever been observed, ever in history. Furthermore, we do not see evolution today. We see microevolution, which is the adaptation within a species. If evolution is true and the earth is truly as old as billions of years, we should see missing links today. We should see mid-evolutionized creatures, but we do not. The fossil evidence just does not support the theory that humans evolved from apes, and the missing links are still missing. Evolutionists in the past, they have been known to manipulate the fossil evidence. They've tried to force their truth upon the theory. Scientists with this preconceived notion have been so eager to prove humans came from apes that they have lied, deceived, and conducted unethical practices. For example, we have Piltdown Man. He was discovered in 1912. The fossil evidence was just a piece of jawbone with two molar teeth and a canine tooth and a piece of skull. The National History Museum did not let any other scientists look at the real bones for 40 years, only the plaster cast. In 1953, it was exposed to be a deliberate hoax involving British scientists. The jawbone was from an orangutan. The skull was human, and they carbon dated the color and colored the bones to appear older than what they actually were. The teeth were also filed down to appear human. But the damage was really already done. The lie was successful since it was not exposed until 40 years later, deceiving many in the process. Another famous deception was Nebraska Man, discovered in 1922. The fossil evidence revealed only a single tooth. In 1927, a journal corrected it to be an extinct species of pig. The famous Australopithecus Lucy was discovered in Ethiopia in 1974 and found by Donald Johanson. The fossil evidence was only 25% complete. Other sources say 40% complete, and you can add more due to symmetry. Lucy displays in a number of museums like in London. She is also displayed in Chicago and at the St. Louis Zoo. This is important because in every location she looks different. It all depends on how the artist wishes to construct her and adding human features where there are no human features. For example, Lucy is constructed to have human hands and human feet when there is no fossil evidence to support that at all. She is also displayed to walk upright due to the knee bone and hip bone attributed to her. But this is also a major misrepresentation. The knee bone was not fully intact. But this, in my opinion, it does not prove that she walked upright. I mean, it's no surprise because chimps, they have knees just like we do. But it gets interesting when we examine her hip bone. The hip bone was found broken in 3 places according to most sources. In 1994, the voice of Donald Johanson explained the work of Dr. Owen Lovejoy as he explained the hip bone. He says, and I quote, "The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bone flare out like a chimp." So maybe she was a chimp. So according to this, the hip bone was human-like. It was crushed. Then when you put the pieces back together, they flare out like a chimp, which is the perfect fit. Do you see the evolution assumptions being applied here? Do bone structures change shape after being fossilized or even before? So Lovejoy sought the plaster cast from its perfect fit to make it fit as a bipedal evolution missing link. He assumed he knew what the hip bone should have looked like instead of observing the actual fossil evidence discovered. In the magazine New Scientist in March 1982, Robert Leakey says Australopithecines definitely walked upright. But later at a convention, he says that paleontologists do not know whether Australopithecines walked upright. He further says that man's ancestors are considerably younger than the 15 to 20 million years, the basis on which paleontologists classify fossil apes and humans are misleading. In 1986, Pat Shipman said the 2.5 million year old skull has overturned all previous notions. We no longer know who gave rise to whom, how, or when. In 2016, Kimball and Vilmore published an article in the Royal Society. They report, and I quote, "Although the transition from Australopithecus to Homo is usually thought of as a momentous transformation, the fossil record bearing on the origin and earliest evolution of Homo is virtually undocumented." They further discuss how paleoanthropologists like Richard Leakey were heavily influenced by Darwin's ideas and conclude by calling the fossil record for early humans poor. The article also goes on to say, however, the more we learn about early Homo, the less compelling is the case that an adaptive shift can be read from currently documented skull and skeletal anatomy as a major transition from generalized Australopithecus precursors. Well, what about Neanderthal man? Neanderthal man was found in 1856 in the Neander Valley in Germany. In 1908, Homo neanderthalensis, given the common name the old man, was found in France, and it was a nearly complete skeletal remains. At the International Congress of Zoology in 1958, Dr. A.J.E. Cave said his examination showed that this famous skeleton found in France over 50 years ago is that of an old man who suffered from arthritis. The fact is, Neanderthals are fully human. They had a different way of life living so long ago, but they are not missing links in evolution. They made sophisticated tools, they hunted, they built homes, they performed surgeries, they cared for their sick. Native Americans also had a very different way of life, but they are fully human. If someone lives in caves or teepees, they are still a person. Even in our modern society, there are regions in Africa of tribal people who live in huts and they hunt animals for food. A different kind of living does not constitute subhumanity, let alone a missing link in evolution. The missing links are still missing according to the fossil record. What you can Google about evolution is the work of artistry and not actual evidence. During the 19th and 20th century, paleoanthropologists were eager to prove and support Darwin's theory. So much so that they used deception and mishandled fossil evidence to do it. Now, not all of them are misleading. Some genuinely report what they find and come to the best conclusions that they can. They also admit when they don't have enough evidence to draw a conclusion at all. But in the past, they have lied to the general public successfully. Many people also do not know that ancestry relationships cannot be determined by fossils anyway. According to Michael Denton and Jonathan Wells, 99% of someone's biology is in their soft anatomy. So, based on fossil evidence, they are merely drawing conclusions from their philosophical beliefs. It is also important to uncover another misleading fact. Science says that human and ape DNA are about 98.5% identical. Is this true? For macroevolution to even take place, DNA must be at least 99% in similarity. Another study was done to test this percentage. Jeffrey Tompkins published an article in 2016 titled Analysis of 101 Chimpanzee Tracered Datasets, Assessment of Their Overall Similarity to Human and Possible Contamination with Human DNA. This is what they found. They found that human and ape DNA are actually 85% identical, much less than reported. The higher percentage was given from picking and choosing which human genomes to match while using the human genome as an actual template. The full human and ape genome was not used for the 98.5%, only some of it. Another study was done by the California Institute of Technology, and they reported that human and ape DNA is only 95% in similarity. And also another reported 92% according to Dr. Ann Gager, who is the senior research scientist at the Biologic Institute in Seattle, Washington. Now, DNA in and of itself is a strong argument for intelligent design. DNA is an irreducibly complex linguistic code. This is irreducibly complex on the basis that every part of the human genome is composed of the right parts, completely formed in the right place, in the right size, in operating order, and at the right time for functionality. Anywhere you see information, it has come from intelligence. There is no such thing as a mindless process. If there is information, if there is a specific, purposeful code anywhere, it has come from a mind. A mindless process such as natural selection could not form purposeful systems and subsystems like we see in DNA. Now, proteins are the building blocks of life. Proteins are composed of amino acids, and these amino acids are in a very specific order to carry out its function. DNA is responsible for ordering the amino acids in proteins. If macroevolution is true, we should see molecular evidence in these protein sequences that are transitional from fish to amphibian or reptile to mammal. But instead, we see the basic types are molecularly isolated from one another. Michael Denton states, at a molecular level, there is no trace of evolutionary transition from fish to amphibian to reptile to mammal. So amphibia, always traditionally considered intermediate between fish and other terrestrial vertebrates, are in molecular terms as far from fish as any group of reptiles or mammals. And to those well acquainted with the traditional picture of vertebrate evolution, the result is truly astonishing. Now, here's a little more information about mutations and natural selection. A mutation is a copying error that occurs in the genes. If this copying error benefits the creature in any way, it's passed down to its offspring through the process of natural selection. If this is the case, we should see slight variations still happening today. Now, the main problem with natural selection is this. Genes can only be selected if they are already in the gene pool to begin with. 50 years of genetic research on the fruit fly have convinced evolutionists that change is limited and confined to a defined population. This fruit fly was given mutation agents, yet over the span of half a century is still a fruit fly. Mutations can only modify or eliminate existing structures. They cannot create new ones. Now, here are those two questions to consider about the origin of the human species. Number 1. Since DNA is a linguistic genetic code of information, how did a natural cause produce this complex information? And number 2, if evolution is a mindless process, how do we have a mind or a consciousness? If it doesn't have a mind, why do we have a mind ourselves at all? Now, in conclusion, the Genesis account of the beginning of the universe and the origin of human beings has never changed. In fact, the evidence such as the Big Bang and our finely tuned universe supports the Genesis account. The fact is, we are here by design, not by chance or random or mindless processes. Your mind, your consciousness, your free will, your gifts, your talents, and your intelligence indeed sets you apart from apes. You are made in the image of God. The amount of information in the 3 billion base pairs in the DNA in every human cell is equivalent to that of 1,000 books of encyclopedia size. If all of the DNA in your body's 100 trillion cells was put into N, it would reach to the sun, which is 90 million miles away, and back over 600 times. Could that be random, or does it point to an intelligent designer? The director of the U.S. National Human Genome Research Institute concluded that there is a God based on his study of DNA alone. Francis Collins is the scientist who led the team that cracked the human genome. He believes that there is a rational basis for a creator, and that scientific discoveries bring man closer to God. Essentially, the theory of evolution does a good job of explaining the survival of a species, but not the arrival of a species. Species adapt over time, but species do not evolve into a brand new, unrelated species. Microevolution is observable. Macroevolution is not. It is highly unlikely that all life began by a single-celled amoeba in the primordial waters billions of years ago. Even so, where did that single-celled amoeba come from? Everything that comes to be requires a cause. In order for macroevolution to take place, mutations must give rise to greater and greater and more complex information. We just do not see this happening in science. Microevolution nearly always results in the same or less genetic information, but hardly an increase in information, which would be required for macroevolution to exist. Evolution over the centuries has brought about major holes and it often hits walls. That could be the reason why the theory continues to be updated, and there's often different definitions to represent the same thing. Yet, Genesis 1 and 1 is still the same. Time, space, and matter are correlative. In the beginning, that's time, God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, that's matter. Follow the evidence where it leads, and it's leading you to an intelligent designer.